I'd like to call the April 18th meeting of the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors to order. Ms. Steele, will you call the roll?
Mr. Gibson?
Here.
Dr. Orth?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Hutson?
Here.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Here.
Mr. Hedrick?
Here.
Mr. Bazzani?
Here.
All present.
Would you join me in the invocation and pledge of allegiance by Dr. J.J. Orth?
Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we have so much to be thankful here in Gloucester. A beautiful county, wonderful water resources, county and state parks, great thriving businesses, many of whom have been recognized with numerous awards, a good school system with dedicated teachers, one of the best volunteer fire and rescue squads in the state, our wonderful sheriff's deputies and staff who keep our county safe, our county employees who work tirelessly behind the scenes to serve the good citizens of Gloucester, and numerous volunteer groups who serve so many of our citizens of need. In a time when there is so much turmoil in our world today, let's not forget the wonderful people who surround us each day and make our world a little bit better for all of us. Also, on the eve of Earth Day, let us not forget the beautiful world we live in and how important it is to keep it this way, especially for our children and their children. Also, give us, our board, the strength and wisdom to make the best decisions for all the citizens of Gloucester. And all of this we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from January 3rd and January 17th?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make the motion that we amend the agenda for tonight's meeting. The first amendment will be changing item in the work session and then agenda number 9F from budget adoption to budget discussion. And then I would also like to change item 11 for closed meeting to add a closed meeting for, Mr. Woolman, I believe it's personnel as well as some potential, make sure I say it correctly, potential.
Acquisition, disposition of an interest in real estate. I think I've already drafted that.
You have.
Yep, you have, but it's
We're
not on,
changing
we're changing the agenda.
Yes, so the two
And-
topics would be personnel, county administrator, and finance director, and the other one is potential acquisition, disposition property, the old Page Middle School site.
I'd like to make my motion to amend the agenda as I stated, plus with what Mr. Wilmot stated.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll move to matters presented by the board.
Yeah.
Dr. Orth.
So, over the last year or so, I've been asking Mr. Records to give us kind of tours of the transportation facility, and certainly, the board visited just prior to when it officially opened. I was very interested because I saw all the buses there one day, and I was like, called Mr. Records, and I said, would you mind if perhaps I come with one other supervisor to see the facility in full operation? So today, Ashley and myself went with Mr. Records, and you could see so many smiling faces in that new facility. The neatest thing was to see the buses in the garage. There were 4 of them, and there was a truck, and they actually had room to walk between the buses and close the garage door. So it's an absolutely wonderful facility, and I think those people have long awaited to have a place that is good, effective, and safe for a work environment. We also had an opportunity to walk through the high school. Wow, that's pretty impressive. They have taken so much apart, and Mr. Records took us to all the different parts, and it's kind of hard to imagine what it's going to look like, but boy, they have torn everything apart. And he made some comments that said we have some really good subcontractors that have been working really hard. Safety issues were of a major concern, and they seem to be really keeping on time. So if any other board members want to go see these facilities, touch base with Mr. Records, he'd be more than happy to give each of you 2-on-1 a tour of the facilities.
Mr. Bazzani.
Just a quick comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I had emailed and texted a couple of you on the Page Middle site. Now that the bus garage is now complete. Mr. Wilmot, are we affecting documents to transfer the title to that property back to the county?
I drafted a deed and a resolution to be considered by this body to accept the property, and a resolution to be considered by the school board to authorize its conveyance. I've heard from the county staff that the documents appear to be in order and appropriate. I have yet to hear from the school board. I sent that out about a month ago.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bazzani, we're looking at doing it for July 1st for multiple reasons. Anyone else? All right, let's move to county administrator items.
I don't have anything tonight. Oh, boy. I just thought I'd shock you all.
Now we're happy to be here. We'll move to citizen comment period. If anyone would like to speak, state your name and magisterial district. Mr. Brown? Okay. Nobody. Okay. We'll move to the work session agenda. We'll have a General Assembly update by the Honorable Keith Hodges, 98th District, soon to be 68th.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone.
Good to be with you this evening. Try to move quickly. And of course, my daughters and my wife, they tell me I like to talk a little bit too much. So if I need to speed up and move things along, just give me the signal. But anyway, it's a pleasure to meet with all of you this evening. And you know, whenever talking to localities, the first thing I like to do is say thank you for what you do each and every day. Local government is, tell you, it's a much more difficult job the way I see it than what we have at Richmond. You make tough decisions each and every day. It's hard work. This is where the rubber hits the road, rubber meets the road, and I just can't thank you enough for what you do. It's a huge commitment. They're tough decisions, and I thank you for what you do. Just first, a little bit of update on committee assignments on where I am now, of course. Health Committee, I've been on that since I was elected, actually, first session in 2012. And it's a little bit of a challenge now. When I first was elected, I think we had 3 physicians, a nurse, a dentist, optometrist, and 2 pharmacists. Now we're down to 2 pharmacists in the House. We have a physician and a dentist over in the Senate. So the institutional knowledge and not having that institutional knowledge, a little bit of a challenge sometimes with the lack of providers in the General Assembly. Of course, I'm on Communications Technology Innovations. I'm on the Appropriations Committee now, and specifically on the Health Subcommittee, Transportation and Public Safety Subcommittee, and Compensation and Retirement Subcommittee. Then, of course, I am now the chair of County, Cities, and Towns, and I will tell you, you'll all be pleased, my #1 priority there is to not let any unfunded mandates get through that committee, and also in the budget. So that's a top priority for me as we hear the bills that move through that committee. We have 2 very strong subcommittees that I work with, and they do an excellent job of preventing those unfunded mandates from getting through. Of course, we adjourned on February 25th. We had roughly, I think, 3,500 bills that we have to deal with in a short 45-day session. And when we adjourned on that day, there was 1 bill that we didn't pass, and that was the state budget. Now, the state budget is actually a 2-year budget. And even though it's a 2-year budget, we come back in a short session the next year in that 45-day session, still look at our revenues and expenditures. The governor makes amendments to those. Then the House and the Senate both look at that and make amendments to the governor's budget. So, of course, we didn't pass that, and it comes down to really a difference between the House and the Senate. We have roughly a $3.6 billion revenue surplus, and the House and the Senate take, you know, really a different approach on how we're going to use that budget surplus. There are those of us in the House that want to give money back to people, especially during these times and with inflation. We stay close to the governor's budget, and roughly between tax and rebates and so forth to individuals, and it's roughly $1.1 billion coming back to the taxpayers. The Senate takes a different approach. So where we are right now, we're kind of, wish I had better news. We're still in negotiations, and I wish I could tell you when that would happen. So that bill is now in conference, where the conferees from the committees in both chambers actually meet and come together and find some middle ground. Expect it will get done, but the one thing is even if we don't pass a budget, there's a budget already in place, so government will still operate. One thing we did do on the last day of session is we passed what we call a skinny budget, and it addressed 4 items, top priorities. One of those was Virginia retirement system, to fund that, to make our constitutionally obligated deposit into the rainy day fund. We also dealt with the grocery tax, where with the grocery tax gone, the Department of Education did not build that into their model when allocating dollars to our school system. So we had a shortfall for our localities. We addressed that to keep our localities whole. And then there was one other thing. What did we do? Cost overruns for state projects. Because of inflation, we put about roughly $100 million to address those cost overruns because of inflation. The governor actually proposed, and we adopted an amendment dealing with the Medicaid re-enrollment. Of course, Medicaid during COVID, no one could actually be taken out of Medicaid during that time. So it's been 3 years since that re-enrollment has taken place. So there was amendment by the governor so we can get to that process, work through it, and leverage the federal dollars to assist with that. It's roughly $10 million, I believe. Of course, we did provide additional 2% on top of the 5% raises in these 2 years to our state employees in K-12. We also increased 2% because of inflation. So that, I think we're in pretty good shape with that because both chambers, I do know, at least at this time, seem to agree. Then there's also an additional $1,000 bonus for K-12 support staff. So that's kind of the budget in the nutshell. I wish I had better news and knew when we pass it. Yes, sir. Supervisor Bazzani.
Mr. Chair, so what is the issue with the Senate with the budget surplus?
They don't want to give as much money back, and they actually want to put more into education, even though in the House we have historic and record increases in education at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a lot of politics involved, I'm sure, too, but can't really address that.
Yeah. So how far apart are you? Does the House want to give it all back, or do they want to save anything for the types of things that the Senate wants? So is there any chance of a compromise to get this done more rapidly to let because I think I made a comment at our last meeting, here we are at the local government, having to have budgets in place by May so we can give the school board their budget. And so we have to do our job. Where is this coming? You know where I'm going. It's frustrating for us because we really try hard. We have to balance our budget, and we're obviously waiting to hear what the state really has. Now I know some things are not as important, but for us the budget is probably the most important thing because it affects everything that we do.
Sure, and thank you, if I may, Mr. Chair. I wish I had a crystal ball and knew at this time where we are. I do have a feeling that there will be some middle ground at this time. When you're looking at, say, your K-12 budget, you may want to look at, say, the House budget, and you're probably pretty safe with those dollars. They may go up. The amount of tax dollars returned that we're looking at, the House may go down. So there may be some middle ground and a compromise in between. And that's the main sticking point at this time. I think most everything is worked out, maybe a few small things that you wouldn't deal with. But I think you're probably pretty safe at this time for taking at least the House as far as the dollars on at least the K-12 spending. I think everything else in the budget, I think you're pretty safe. But that's the main thing that you're looking at is the K-12 at this point. But I do wish I had a crystal ball. I remember, was that 2014 or 15? I believe it was the middle of June before we finally went back and passed the budget. But
you mentioned about the shortfall because of the 1% issue. Is that coming out of the extra money that was a surplus, or was that already built into the existing budget?
Well, that wasn't the budget. That actually came, of course, that was built into the governor's budget, and DOE has the calculator where they're going to send the dollars back to the school systems, which is that basic aid education, I believe, is what it's called. It did not take into account the grocery tax to make everyone whole, so it's leaving a shortfall. So we stepped up and made that happen. No, that was already built into the budget. We built that into the budget. You know, the surplus, you know, of course, with the economy, you're looking at sales tax right now. In March, they've started to fall a little bit. As far as the dollars on that 1.1 billion that the House is looking at giving back to taxpayers, there are certain parameters and metrics that have to be met before that happens as well. So we put in safeguards. We're very conservative in that approach. We want to ensure that we have a balanced budget. We were fairly conservative going into, you know, COVID with the possibility of a recession, and we still want to do the same because there's so much economic uncertainty.
Okay, so what you're saying is that in using this conservative approach, there's the possibility that 3.6 billion may not be 3.6 billion.
Possibly.
If dependent
Possibly.
on, because we ask the same questions of our CFO about our sales tax, because, you know, we have seen a general increase in our sales tax revenues because of Gloucester's unique location in attracting people from shopping outside the county. And we've seen growth in that, and that has been very important because if you looked at our tax rates over the last decade, they've remained relatively stable, and I think a lot of it is because we've had modest growth, that we've been able to keep our tax rate at a relatively similar rate. But you know, those sales tax revenues, you know, we don't know anything about them until late April for the third quarter. Ms. Spivey has been really good at projections, but even projections don't help us in the final analysis.
Sure. And if I may, when you're looking at the surplus and the dollars that for K-12, that's not going to affect your K-12 or your locality dollar amount. You know, that's built into our budget. That's going to happen. What we're looking at is that 1.1 billion to return to folks. There are certain metrics on that end where certain parameters have to kick in. So you'll remain whole. I don't expect a huge drop in that surplus, but you know, we might expect a little bit based on sales tax.
If there is money to return, how do they determine how much everyone gets? Is it across the board, everyone gets the
That's
same?
still going to be in negotiation.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Bazzani.
one more question. So the Senate's controlled by the Democrats, obviously, right?
Yes, sir.
So are they looking into more, they want to spend on social programs? Is that what they're looking
More in
into?
education.
More education?
More in education.
Okay.
Dr. Orth.
What about safety? This board has talked about safety issues in our schools, and you're well aware, I'm sure all the schools are very concerned given the history of what's been happening. And, you know, we are very concerned, obviously, in Gloucester. I'm hoping it's reached a pretty high level of discussion at the state in providing communities with some additional support, you know, for security measures for our county.
And there are. In the House and the Senate budget, both have dollars allocated at an increase in dollars for instance, SRO officers and so forth. And
But the problem is SROs, everyone wants them.
Right.
And they're not there. And that's the problem. How do we get around that? I mean, we're talking about other security issues that would affect, you know, people entering schools, but, you know, we face the same issue almost all counties do. Where do we find SROs?
And that's a challenge, if I may, in today's workforce, finding people to work, and, you know, in healthcare, finding pharmacy technicians, people that, number one, they have to want to work. Number two, they're looking for decent pay. And number three, say in healthcare, they have to pass a drug test, and you put all of that together, it's a challenge these days. And especially in some of our younger folks, I hate to be frank, but, you know, that's the truth. And, you know, we're looking at increasing officers' pay, which needs to be done, and teacher pay as well. You're looking at law enforcement, healthcare, and education right now are really the big three, and the challenge of finding folks. And I'll talk a little bit about some things that I'm working on, especially in the healthcare side, but it's a challenge across the board. But, you know, of course, when we're working through the budget, my main priorities are to keep taxes low, ensure that our localities remain whole with no unfunded mandates, and I talked about that. We want to make Virginia more competitive for families and businesses, and also invest more in education, and of course, security is part of that as well, and of course, invest more in law enforcement as well. It's a top priority in the General Assembly. Also, behavioral health is one of my number one priorities as well, and I'll talk about that in a little while. As far as, I think I got out of order, but that's all right. As far as, things, particular interests you may be interested, number one, VATI grants. Gloucester was successful receiving a VATI grant. They are working, and of course, last year's budget, gosh, I've drawn a blank on the increase in funding, but for broadband, but they are working. There have been some folks in our urban areas that want to tweak that a little bit. I've been very hesitant to do that because I do not want it to affect our rural localities. And that's, yes, ma'am.
Okay, my turn now. I wasn't going to interrupt, but just when you mentioned that the body grant, just a reminder that we only qualified for 133 homes in the entire county that met the criteria. So I personally have been advocating for the criteria to change every year.
Yeah, they've been advocating on the opposite end that would take it away from rural, and it's a big fight.
But we're not getting it in rural.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about overlap. And so if the urban areas are asking to have the restrictions on overlap changed, it will help counties like Gloucester as well.
They had some other things. Get with me, and we'll get a few of us together and try to address that. The legislative process and get those ideas together and what we can do out here in our rural districts, and we'll be glad to work on that. Of course, we had an energy bill, and we call it the Dominion bill, which at the end of the day, it was a big compromise, and that really reforms how our state's largest utility Dominion is regulated. And what it will do is bring stabilization to the rates. It also puts dollars for investment still into infrastructure and gives folks some at least stability to know what their energy bills will be, and hopefully in the long run more money in their pockets. I-64, of course, in the Middle Peninsula. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of it, well, I've been following some of the stories in places that are deregulated. I had heard that there was some discussion about deregulating and the problems that I had in Texas. That's not going to come to,
Okay. That's deregulation in Virginia on energy. I don't see it any time in the near future. As far as Interstate 64, we have 75% of our workforce drives out of the workplace, out of the district to work each and every day. 64 is a major corridor, and you have a bottleneck between Lightfoot and New Kent, roughly 23 miles. So that RFQs went out in March. We continue to fund that, and I believe in September we'll start construction. And not only will that help folks here as they travel back and forth each and every day, it's going to be a tremendous asset for our port, which is doing very, very well, and to move the goods and services throughout the Commonwealth. Of course, healthcare is very important to me, and I serve on the Virginia Healthcare Workforce Development Authority, Joint Commission on Healthcare, and I also serve on the Area Health Education Center, is what we call the AHECs. And there is a tremendous healthcare workforce shortage, and I call it a workforce crisis. And when you look at the number one private sector employer in the Middle Peninsula, it's healthcare. And we don't have the providers. They anticipate, I believe it's roughly maybe 40,000 primary physicians will be short in this country. In the next 10 years, nursing agencies now at this time are billing our health systems up to $200 an hour. So the agents keeping a good part, the nurse gets this much, but your reimbursements are still the same. That's a tremendous burden on our healthcare system. And it's a challenge to take care of patients. And when you look at behavioral health, we have one psychiatrist in the Middle Peninsula. That's it, and with that, the support staff. And I'll talk about mental health in just a second. We don't have the providers. And how do we fix that, and what do we do? So last year, I actually created a position in the governor's office that works across the secretariat positions to look at the obstacles and the challenges and how we can address this. You typically think of the Secretary of Health as solving this, but that's a regulatory. They deal with all the regulatory agencies, the boards, and Department of Health. And of course, there are licensing challenges and obstacles there, but then you look over, it's actually a workforce issue, so it belongs under the Department of Labor. And then you look at, I was talking about reimbursements, you need Medicaid reform, insurance reform with the reimbursements, and that's under the Secretary of Commerce. And then you need a K-12 pipeline up to our universities and our community colleges to train these kids, whether it's either a technician program or nursing or whatever it may be, and to have that funnel and that pipeline. So this person actually works across those agencies, across those secretariats to work at the challenge, to look at the challenges and the obstacles and what opportunities we have, because it's been addressed in silos in the past. We also have the Healthcare Workforce Authority that I serve on. We also have a very extensive study, the first of its kind, in 3 phases. We've received the first one. We should have receivables on the second one this summer, and then by September, the third. That's really taking an in-depth look at this and how we can address it. We're getting older and grayer in the Middle Peninsula. We need to take care of the folks here, but we also need to give our kids opportunities to stay here, and healthcare is our #1 employer. So we need to give them the opportunities. Mental health, of course, is a tremendous challenge. We're seeing it, and I won't even get, we're focusing on providers. We do need more providers. We're not focusing on the cause, and that's another conversation for another day. And I have some ideas, moving forward with that. But mental health, there are a number of obstacles that we're dealing with. And our law enforcement, I commend them for what they do, and the TDOs and the challenges. And in that TDO process, when it takes an officer off the street to sometimes stay in the hospital with someone and I've had examples of where it's been 4 or 5 days where someone has to stay in the hospital. And, we need those officers on the street to take care of us. We need them in our schools. So we're trying to address this. The governor actually put $230 million into mental health and a number of different programs. We've actually boosted that and changed that a little bit, probably on both sides, and we'll have a very robust package to try to address this, because it's affecting our schools, it's affecting our localities, it's affecting law enforcement, and we've got to find a fix for that. As far as some initiatives that I'm working on, of course, I focus on the Middle Peninsula. I don't get in the weeds on the politics too much. I have a long-term approach. There's really nothing written. It's all in the back of my head, unfortunately. But, I want to help the people here in the Middle Peninsula. And, of course, when you look at healthcare coverage, premiums are way too high. Last year, I actually passed a bill that for realtors, realtors are independent contractors, so they can't get into a large group. This was the first of its type in Virginia where it brings the realtors together as a large group through their state association. You can do that under the Affordable Care Act, and you meet certain parameters where there's certain, you have to have certain coverage, and I can't remember the phrase for it, but you have to have a basic coverage. This even allows them to extend that coverage to higher levels and create programs and creative programs. Federal government typically has to grant a waiver. We don't know what the federal government will do with that, and we moved ahead with it, and the Attorney General said he'll defend us, and I think we're in pretty good shape with that. So that's coming together. Now that gave me an idea. How can we do the same thing for our localities? And I think we talked about this. It's not ready for prime time. But localities right now either have to go out and shop around for insurance or local choices, really your own 2 options. So I'm actually working on a way to bring our localities together. This could bring CSBs together, it can bring our schools together, and have a large group, and hopefully, in the long run, help with the premiums and lower healthcare costs. Lower healthcare costs to the individuals and the healthcare costs to the localities as well. Of course, solar has been a hot topic for a number of years. Passed legislation that looks at the decommissioning of the solar sites. So when these solar sites go in, they're there 35 to 40 years on a lease. And under the original enabling legislation, it has to be returned to its original state. Well, of course, if it hasn't been farmed in 35 or 40 years, it's going to take a long time before you can farm that again. A lot of fertilizer, topsoil. I actually have a decommissioning study that should be released, I believe, December 1st, to relook at the decommissioning and disposal and what we're going to do with the solar panels and returning the land and the economic impact. So we should have that back December 1st. But when I look at solar also, the electricity that's generated from these solar panels goes where? It goes to a business in Northern Virginia. That's who's purchasing it. And what were our localities getting out of it? Very little as far as tax revenue. And that locality in Northern Virginia is creating hundreds, if not thousands of jobs and huge economic wealth. But we're the ones that have to look at it. We've got to deal with the decommissioning in 35 or 40 years. And, you know, I look at it as an urban-rural issue. You're taking what we have, but what are we getting out of it? So the legislation, the simple version of the legislation is it opens it up very much like it's a siting agreement. It's not a proffer, it's a siting agreement. Let's have an open and honest debate or talk about, all right, what's good for us? Write me a check. We need broadband. We need money for our schools. So since that legislation was passed a year and a half ago, we have hundreds of millions of dollars that have gone into some of our rural localities because of that bill. I'm not saying solar's right or wrong, but what I'm saying is if a locality chooses to do it, they can live with it, and they're willing to have, you know, someone's willing to open the checkbook, and, you know, we've got to look at it, then that's the locality's decision. It's your choice. Of course, one thing I wanted to talk about, cannabis. I think there have been some questions regarding cannabis and marijuana and businesses. Of course, I've never been a proponent for the legalization of marijuana. I actually got a lot of press out of this one because when I look at marijuana and the legalization of marijuana and how it was propped up and the lack of the regulations, it's propping up the black market. 80% of the sales of marijuana on the street, the dollars are funneled and you're feeding it to the black market. So you're looking at organized crime, human trafficking, all of those things. Plus you're seeing marijuana on the street that has been sprayed with things. You're seeing it laced with heroin, fentanyl, cocaine. It's unsafe. It's not going away. And, you know, people, that's behind us now. The legalization is here, so how can we make it safe? I actually had legislation that for the processors, you have 5 pharmaceutical processors in Virginia, everything would go through them. And it was assayed, you know it's safe, and it would prop up that market. And then the way I look at it, you can do it in your home, you can't drive with it, just like you can't have an open container. You make it safe, you tax it, and then those dollars go into mental health and law enforcement. Of course, didn't make it, but I'm gonna keep trying because we can't have those types of products on the street. Then, of course, we wanted to rein in what you call the Delta 8. So you've got your Delta 8 and your Delta 9. Delta 9 is your traditional THC that you hear about. Delta 8 is very similar to THC, same psychoactive properties, but it's not illegal. It's not illegal it's not classified as a Schedule I drug, and there's no federal oversight. So all of these folks, and it's being sold all over the place, and we've seen a number of problems with it. We passed legislation that to get rid of the Delta 8. The governor did tweak it a little bit based on some concerns, and there were some parents that are using a particular product that it's a combination of the CBD with a small amount of THC in it, and it's helping these children with seizures. There's not enough market for the processors to step up and make it, so we tweaked it a little bit to still allow those folks to be able to obtain that product. So what you're going to see now is the Delta 8's going away, and it's primarily going to be just the CBD oil. So CBD has no psychoactive properties and no more than 0.3% of the THC. So no psychoactive properties being sold. So
You only had one more question earlier.
Oh, well, just a quick question. So,
Yes, sir.
if we get to a point where it is potentially legalized in Virginia, how do you control where it's sold? Because I can envision someone standing across the street from a school system selling dope to kids.
No, sir. And actually, my bill actually propped up the retail market, certain licenses and so forth as well to be able to do that. So, I'm the last person in the world that would legalize it, but the legalization is here. So my bill, what I did is try to rein it in and have a safe product.
Yeah, but you don't control the Senate.
Yeah, well, it still has to come back over to us, and we'd have to approve it. So you have to have support in both chambers. So and actually the Senate, when this bill was going through, the folks in the Senate and folks you're talking about actually really liked my idea and how that's going to work. So of course, water is, of course, even though I'm in healthcare, water, I'm somehow the water guru now in the General Assembly. So whether it deals with stormwater, groundwater, flooding, resiliency, all of those things, it kind of goes through me. See Supervisor Chriscoe smiling and grinning over there, but you know, we've kind of created a niche in the General Assembly. And this is a long-term approach. It's very, very complicated. Water is our greatest asset, but at the same time, it's also our greatest liability. We have 1,000 miles of shoreline in the Middle Peninsula. We're the land of failed septic systems on the East Coast, which is not a great reputation to have. And, when you go down into Guinea on a king tide, you have 600 septic systems that are flooded on a sunny day. So it's a public health crisis, it's also an environmental crisis. So how do we address that and deal with it? I always look at things as, if we have a negative, how do you make it into a positive? And it's my goal to turn resiliency and water actually into an industry cluster and take the challenges that we have and turn those into industry clusters here on the Middle Peninsula. And we're making great progress. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about my Living Shorelines bill. If you're familiar with living shorelines, they are the preferred method for resiliency in the Commonwealth, protect water quality, but they are very expensive, up to $650 a linear foot. So you're looking at what? I don't know, just that little stretch over there. I mean, you're looking at $12,000, $13,000 right there for the width of this room for a living shoreline. Your average homeowner can't afford that. I tweaked the Living Shorelines bill last year and was able to start to look at different technologies. You look at other structural materials and use different technologies that still protect water quality. They have the elements of a living shoreline, and you can bring the cost down by much as 80%. And because of that bill, what is it? We have 38 total companies, I think, that are looking to do business in Virginia. Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's my understanding that that's the preferred type, but it's not required. So
if it's a new project, you're going to have to build a living shoreline. You can replace what you have, is the way I understand it. That's the way I understand it. Now, so you can replace what you have if you have a hardened structure. But if you're going to move forward with a new project, it's going to be a living shoreline. So, sir?
So what does that do if you want to put a stone?
Riprap, I'm getting to that. I've got a different product that we use and actually bring down the cost of even the riprap. Riprap is a hardened structure. Oysters don't really strike on granite. So when you take this bill and look at it, we have these companies that want to do business in Virginia. We have 18 of them that want to come here to the Middle Peninsula. So I'm going to put that aside for a second. And because of that bill, concrete is actually a much better product to use than a living shoreline. Oyster strike on it does very well. Granite, not so good. So when you look at the challenges we have with dredging here in the Middle Peninsula, of course, the Coast Guard will not be, well, back up for a second. The federal government, through earmarks, funded dredging at one time. Earmarks went away, so as these creeks fill in, the Coast Guard can't get in there to navigate the markers come up, there go the business in the marinas, your gas, your bait, and all of the boaters coming down to spend money. So we do have some money in the budgets, House and the Senate. We had to make some language amendments. We have $5 million for the Middle Peninsula and Eastern Shore to set up a dredge program. I think we have 17 creeks already site ready to go once we get those dollars, and we can start to move forward with that. Problem we have is I also streamline the dredging regulations in Virginia through VMRC to make that a little bit easier. Problem we have is with the Corps and the placement of those spoils, which is federal. So with that dredge material, it actually can be turned into an aggregate product, turned into concrete. And we have a business that wants to come and locate right here in the Middle Peninsula. We have an endless supply of dredge spoils. And you can turn that into aggregate. You can use it in construction. You can use it in living shorelines. We can help Tangier. It's a great product, and it can be as much as 40% of the cost of concrete as well. Because of that bill, we have 18 companies that are actually looking to locate possibly here in the Middle Peninsula and collaborate, and I can't really call it an industrial park, but it's a resiliency cluster that will create jobs. So we're trying to take the challenges and turn that into an opportunity. So we're solving the problem with dredging.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Mr. Hedrick has a question.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Hedrick.
Yes, Mr. Hodge. A little more clarity on what a living shoreline is.
Living shoreline, I guess it actually, and I can pull up the definition, it basically, it's your grasses and your sands and your certain rocks and stone that protect water quality as well and make water quality better versus a hardened structure like boards. But also those living shorelines, they're different because oysters can strike on them and crabs, and they'll, you know, critters will be in there. So it really helps the bay in the long run as well. So that's why this product, oysters will strike on it. If you use granite, oysters aren't going to strike on it. So we're trying to take, in the long run, have an industry cluster here in the Middle Peninsula. And we're doing the same thing with septic. You know, we're the land of failed septic systems on the East Coast. We have thousands across the Middle Peninsula and the Northern Neck. And hopefully soon, we're going to have systems installed. I was able to get funding in the budget for it's above ground system. All the treatment is above ground. And no nitrogen, no phosphorus going into the watershed. Possibly, we're looking at, pumping it every 2 years, but this is to really look at the design, to study, maintain it, and try to find a way to get the cost down. It's our goal, and I think we can do it. We definitely can get the cost down below an alternative system, and we can make it competitive or possibly even lower than your traditional system. Now, what that does is that's going to help with, finish this one real quick and I'll get you. What that's going to do, it's going to help property values because you have all of these failed systems that you're dealing with VDH and trying to get in a system or an alternative system, or it may be in the RPA. And trying to navigate through that is very costly, very cumbersome. And what this will do, it will remove that, and it will help property values tremendously by doing that. Yes, sir.
So I guess what is the overarching goal of living shorelines? To clean the bay?
Well, it's to protect. It's to protect property, but also help with water quality, and to protect the bay as well. Hardened structures really don't do that.
Are neighboring states doing the same thing, like
I'm not
Maryland?
sure. I think.
Why are we
I
the
think
only ones trying to do this? Because the bay's been polluted for the last 30 years and hasn't improved over the last 30 years.
Don't get me started on that. But others are. Of course, we've got to deal with the Susquehanna and what comes down there.
You got to be really careful when you talk about those types of structures actually improving water quality. What it really does is protect shoreline.
Well, it protects shorelines, but
and
if you take out the hardened structures and so forth, you're going to be improving water quality.
Well, what you're really doing is preventing the input of sediments that have the nutrients. So, yeah,
you got to be careful.
How the terminology is really tough when you start talking.
Can be, but a lot of the places that we're looking at, we have a tremendous amount of runoff, tremendous amount of erosion, sand, sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus washing off, and this will, by preventing that, you're in the long run.
Well, Dr. Orth is a world-renowned expert.
Yeah, but you should, and it's going to depend on site location. But yeah, it's touchy, but it can't. It's part of the discussions when I do these. Water quality comes first because you have to protect water quality to make it better. When I do that, when looking at all of this.
So is this going to end up being an unfunded mandate for new property owners who want to put up?
No, it's been in place. Actually, what I'm looking at is saving property owners dollars. Because what you're looking at in place right now is taking the living shorelines, reducing those costs, and helping property owners and starting an industry cluster here using those products in those living shorelines. So you're taking something that's cumbersome for folks that can't afford your traditional living shoreline, giving them alternatives that have the elements of a living shoreline at a much lower cost, and then creating jobs. And that's what I'm looking at with septic, long-term goal with septic as well. We can put this into place. Those septic systems are going to have to be manufactured somewhere. We're going to need the engineers. We're going to need those folks. And I will tell you, my long-term goal with a lot of this is, we can help, and you're all familiar with the WIP and the nitrogen phosphorus that's going into the bay and our WIP goals in Virginia. We're under a federal requirement right now to meet certain parameters and by a certain date, and I can't remember those dates right off, but the urban areas and what they call the MS4 localities are required to do that. And if we don't meet those goals, they're going to be heavily penalized in the long run. We're under no mandate to do anything in the long run. Our localities are not mandated to do anything, but we can do quite a bit. And we're talking about our living shorelines, we're talking about the septic systems and so forth. We're going to be saving the state and these MS4s a tremendous amount of money. So at the end of the day, the way I look at it, these urban areas, if we're saving them that much money, somehow they should have some skin in the game and help lower those costs in the long run as well, is kind of the way I look at it. I'm still trying to crack that open. And it goes back to the same argument I had with solar. We eventually got there with it, but it's the same argument. we're helping those urban areas. They're the ones that have built out and polluted and so forth. Our water, for the most part, is pretty good here. And we proved that in the study that VIMS did with our ditches. And, but we can still do a great deal to protect the bay. And I think in the long run, if we can help them, somehow they need to have some skin in the game and help us. And then what I'm also trying to do is like with the dredging, that takes the core kind of out of the equation, because you don't need those areas for the spoil sites, because you're turning into a product. And I'm trying to find ways to streamline, make things easier for property owners, which is why I put in a bill for a university collaborative this year. And when you look at resiliency and VMRC permitting, VMRC is required under statute to get their guidance from VIMS. Now, VIMS does great work, but they don't have coastal engineer and so forth, and don't necessarily have, and as we expand this, we need expertise in certain areas. VIMS is still in the code and allows for that, but it gives the secretary and the agencies the flexibility to look elsewhere and collaborate for these universities, collaborate in these complex issues. Of course, the Virginia Coastal Policy Center dissolved, if you're familiar with that, and down at William & Mary, and was very sad. And the Virginia Coastal Policy Center and Elizabeth Andrews did excellent work for a number of years, providing guidance for our localities, for military, for state agencies across the board. Whether William & Mary didn't handle it very well, and if they were here, I would say that. It was not handled very well. And we tried an amendment with the governor to look at Sea Grant to actually come in and have a university collaborative. And there were some folks that were still uncomfortable with that, but we're looking at a long-term fix, because Coastal Policy Center over the years has provided a tremendous amount of guidance and expertise. And one thing I'm very, very proud of this session is blue catfish legislation. This one, I got some press on it as well. And when you look at blue catfish, actually it's DWR, which is formerly Game and Inland Fisheries, stocked rivers farther up in fresh water with blue catfish, because they wanted a large trophy sport fish as an economic driver. Well, number one, they probably didn't look at their diet and how much they were going to eat in the long run, and they didn't realize at that time how saltwater tolerant they have become. You're seeing them in the bay now. You're seeing them out here in the York River, actually right on the Gloucester King Queen line, just this side of Propotank Creek. We caught 15,000 pounds in a week. And you start to get up around Tappahannock and in the Pamunkey and Pianki-Tank, you're looking at 75% of the fish biomass. The state record is around 140 pounds, I believe, and they eat everything. They eat crabs, and someone sent me a picture of one. It wasn't a really large fish. It was probably 12 pounds or so. It had 25 crabs in it, some of them as much as 5 inches long. VIM study down in the James River, a 5-mile stretch down there, and this is in the lower James. They eat 2 million crabs a year. Now, we have hundreds of miles of these rivers and blue catfish, so imagine how many crabs they're eating. The numbers on the menhaden that they eat. So they like those peanut bunkers that spend the first year or two of their life farther upriver. And when you do the math on it, they prevent 1 million tons of adult menhaden from 1 million tons of menhaden from reaching adult size each year. They eat, rockfish. They eat shad. They eat herring. They will swallow 400,000 rockfish eggs in a single gulp. When a rockfish spawns, they can swallow that in a single gulp. They eat clams. We've seen them with muskrats in them and whole ducks.
So whose great idea?
Well, this goes back to the 70s, and they wanted a large sport fish in Virginia. So this goes back in the 70s and 80s. So the problem is what do we do to get rid of them? So there was a problem as far as establishing a fishery. USDA in the Farm Bill has, for the farm-raised catfish, they don't need a USDA inspector on site, but on the wild catfish, and that was all political, you need to have a USDA inspector on site, which created a lot of problems with the private sector and having these folks on site. So we have a few small processors. We have some small ones around here, And then we have 2 large ones down in southeastern Virginia. The problem is, you know, you catch them up here, if you needed to haul them way down there, rigor mortis sets in, the USDA inspector says we can't claim them, you gotta throw them all away. We need to prop up a fishery. So I worked with Congressman Whitman's office, had Secretary Lohr, who spent some time at USDA. We had a dozen USDA folks on the call. We worked that out and pretty much fixed that. We're gonna have the inspectors and we'll be able to do that. But we need to incentivize the private sector to be able to step up with processing, flash freeze, which is gonna open up your restaurant market, and be able to ship them. And you even have folks that want the whole fish gutted, 2 tractor trailer loads a week. And so I wanted $4 million. We were able to get $2 million, and I had Senator Stewart carried over on the Senate side. And this is the governor's catfish opportunity fund. It is absolutely delicious fish if you've never eaten it. I even had a buddy of mine, when I was passing through going to Richmond, he cooked it up, and I fed 4 secretaries, 3 deputy secretaries, and some of the governor's staff blue catfish. So it was a good way to sell the product, and we were able to get it through. Now, if we can capture 10% of the blue catfish market in the country, and there's no blue catfish market established on the East Coast, that's 900 to 1,000 jobs. Tremendous number of jobs. So we're going to be solving a problem, creating jobs, and you know, we've studied it for far too long and no one was doing anything. So we were finally a little creative and navigated through the problems and try to prop this up. So I'm very excited about that bill, and I'm going to be looking for more money in the long run. We've got to find a way to take care of this problem and protect our fisheries, because you look at the rockfish, the crabs. Personally, it's the #1 threat to the bay right now, the #1 threat. And they're eating all of the fish. They're eating everything. I could pass around a picture of a gutted catfish with all of those, but I don't know, some of y'all may not want to see it. But they, you know, whole ducks. So they pretty much eat everything. I keep talking about a lot of things, but I'm going to look over there. You know, we do have some challenges ahead, of course. We do have, of course, economic uncertainty, of course, is a challenge. Redistricting, of course, we're going to have a tremendous number of new legislators next year in the General Assembly, and part of that was redistricting. In some cases, we had 3 incumbents clustered together and 2 incumbents over here. Some decided not to run, some moved, but just general turnover, I expect we can have anywhere from 35 to 37 new House members out of 100, and Senate, you know, we could have 15 or so, 13. So we're going to have a large turnover in the General Assembly next year. And of course, as you said, the 98th will become the 68th, the Middle Peninsula, because we're losing population. This district's getting larger. So I'll go from, I guess, from probably the farthest places down in New Point up to either, whether I go to Newtown or now up to Mangahick, which is only about 5 miles from Doswell, or up to Supply in Essex, it's about 72, 74 miles. So a little bit more ground to cover. But it does make sense. We have all of the Middle Peninsula localities together. And I like that personally. We have our opportunities, our challenges and our opportunities are very similar, and I think we work well together. And we can do some good things together. I am losing Gloucester Point, though. Just one little sliver down there is going across the river to meet the population on the other side. But other than that, I can keep talking. But so I appreciate everything.
Mr. Gibson.
Button pushed here. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your hard work at the General Assembly. I've just got three things I wanted to talk to you about briefly. One, I appreciate your support for law enforcement. It's such a competitive environment to hire good officers, and our sheriff has struggled with that, and these young men and women are out there risking their lives, and so that's been a big emphasis of our board. And we are also very focused on school security to protect our vulnerable school children and teachers, and so whatever you can continue to do to support law enforcement and to help us improve school security, we would greatly appreciate that.
Sure. And if I may, just so I don't forget, I do commend the sheriff for the program, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the program for the new deputies that Gloucester has. Wonderful program, and it should be a model for other areas in the state.
Yes.
And the training academy that he has. But
yeah,
they
we're very
into place.
fortunate.
Very proud of that. I've been some of those and attended and spoke, so.
One theme I'm hearing, second thing is one theme I'm hearing, jobs.
Jobs.
We need some more jobs here in Gloucester County. I'm hearing catfish jobs and living shoreline jobs. And we have a 28-acre site, and you mentioned industries are interested in coming here, so please refer them to our economic development folks, because we are ready for more jobs in Gloucester County.
We can, and if I could make, and that's the challenge. We have these sites scattered in our rural areas, and in today's world, it's very competitive with infrastructure and broadband and people live here and so forth. So trying to balance both.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. Last thing is we have a new state park here, but we need more funding for it. So we're off to a great start. The community loves it, but there are aspects of that park that still need development, and so we would certainly appreciate your support there.
Glad to. Glad
Thank
to
you.
support.
Any more questions? Delegate Hodges, I'd like to thank you for coming tonight. I know it's been a while since you've been here for one reason or another. That needs to change. You need to come a little more regular. If you
Let
can
me know. Give me a shout.
fit us into your schedule.
Schedule's a little bit
Bring some cash.
crazy. Hey, I'll do it. But it's a challenge, and as you're there longer, and then working for a living all over the place. So
I
it
understand.
took me a while. I actually work here in Gloucester today, so it takes a few minutes to get out of pharmacy mode into government mode. So, but it's a
You're
challenge,
pushing
and now I'm
something
somebody
one way or
else's.
the other.
But, we're getting some good things done, and I really appreciate all you do and what you do here at the local level.
Thanks,
So,
Skip.
y'all come see me during session, too. So, but thank y'all.
Thanks, Skip. We'll move to the next item. It's open broadband update. Eric Beach.
Good evening. Just wanted to give you a quick update on where we are on broadband within the county. Of course, we've got three different groups. We've got the VADI, ARPA, and the remainder of the citizens, the VADI being the unserved, ARPA being the underserved, and then the rest of the county that may have a choice. With regards to VADI, we have roughly 4 people signed up currently under the VADI group out of 133. Now, that doesn't mean only 4 people have availability to that. It means that some people may have decided to not have it anyway. With the VADI plan, as you probably know, those citizens do have the choice of not taking the service, and we've had a few that have said, no thanks, believe it or not. Let's see. We've also got the 3 towers that are dealing with the VADI program, the landfill, the Matthews Tower there at North, the tower there on 14, and then the link between the two with the Beaver Dam. The 2 landfill and Matthews Towers are both fully up and running and operational, with both the CBRS and the LTE, point-to-point and the CBRS LTE options. The difference there being that if they've got a line of sight, we can go to point-to-point, which is the most reliable, but we can also go to the LTE if they can't see the antenna right from their house. With the ARPA project, and I mentioned the Beaver Dam antenna or tower, which is included in that project, we were about 30% done on that. We're waiting on a building permit to bring the equipment up to the tower and mount it, and then bring power to the equipment on the ground. And I also want to say with VADI and ARPA, those 2 projects are also opening up to citizens who haven't had or aren't in those 2 groups. They can actually sign up as well. So as we're moving out from landfill, Matthews Tower, Beaver Dam, Main Street Water Tower, with the VADI and ARPA projects, citizens can also sign up who may want to switch from another provider that they currently have.
Mr. Bazzani.
Mr. Beach, are you saying that with VADI you have 133, as this installs, potentially have 133 people have access to internet, but you're saying that what you're seeing is that none of them, or a large majority, are not wanting to sign up for it?
No, no. So we have 133 that fell in the VADI grant group. Not all of them have signal yet. They're still working on that and getting that signal out to those remote areas. We've just seen a few people just decline, not want service, not want internet. It's very few, but we have seen it. Then, of course, we have 4 new towers, 3 of which are construction, and the 4th one is the monopole at Bethel Peasley. We have the we have the tower at Fire Station 4, the tower at Achilles, and the tower at Brent and Becky's. We're working on the site plans on those now. Jamie Gray is it Jamie or Jimmy? Jamie Gray is working with Open Broadband to get those site plans drawn up and completed, and then I think Ted is working on the easement agreements as well. So just a little bit of a timeline. We thought Open Broadband had given us till the end of April that they would have all the VADI residents able to have service if they wanted it. But it looks like that's probably going to be late May before they get that all lit up for them. And then June, we're going to have the Page Water Tower have its equipment installed. And I'm predicting that it's probably going to be, the way the site plans have been going for the towers, it's probably going to be late summer before we start seeing construction on the towers. And that's about it. Is there any questions?
Any more questions?
Mr. Chair, if I can just mention, we talked about the Bethel Peasley
That's
Tower.
my question.
Yep.
We have done the application, we've paid our fee.
Correct.
It's all being worked out with Verizon, so that's still, when we met with the folks out there, when they didn't want to see the tower on the school property, we explained how it can take months and months and months and to get through with Verizon, and that's what we're doing. So we're still waiting to have approval from them.
Correct. We've sent on, yes, all the applications and their fees have been turned in.
So that means that we will use Verizon's tower there as opposed to building our own and installing our own? Okay.
Yeah.
Just making it clear.
Mr. Bazzani?
And what's the cost to get the internet through the VADI program per month?
It's right around $30, $30 to $50 to be able to get that. I think that's
30 to
correct,
50.
Carol.
And I think it's closer to 50 for what most people want.
Yeah.
They do offer a lower level service,
Yeah, the
just like
lowest tier.
Cox does too, for, especially with students. They participate in the national program for students who are on free and reduced lunch, things like that.
It does sound cheap to $30, but it's the lowest available qualifying speed that the state now has for broadband.
So, question, so you're saying the speed's not the same, a $30 package as the $50 package?
That's correct.
It doesn't make that funny noise that you used to hear.
We can put that in there for you if you want.
Mr. Gibson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Beach, for your presentation. I know you're working very hard to get this implemented as soon as possible, but the number one question I receive from residents is, when is open broadband going to be online for the entire Gloucester County? There are many, many questions, and as you know, it's critical for business development, it's critical for education. I live in the northern part of the county.
Right.
My entire area, we have zero internet coverage, and I had to seek other options in order to have any sort of internet. And so this is a really, really critical need, and it just feels like the implementation from open broadband is sluggish. And what can we do to increase the speed? So, sluggish like the internet speeds, we need this to move more quickly, because this is a critical need for our residents.
I agree, and I have 3 to 4 calls a week in my office asking the same thing. And we are applying pressure to open broadband. They are a small company, and they have a lot of, it's not an excuse, but they have a lot of places they're thin, but we have asked that they bring more people in. We're being reassured that that's the case, to help facilitate the orders and put these antennas in place and get people online.
I appreciate that. I'm not pointing fingers.
No,
I know
no,
you're
I-
working hard. I
100%
want to,
agree.
I just encourage you to continue to use whatever resources and leverage you have to move them along.
Yep.
Thank you.
We're
Absolutely.
very pleased that they did hire a local person who is their rep now, so we have like a project manager who lives in the county. So that's made a difference since he
Yeah,
came
and
on
he's very
board.
involved with the county, knows quite a few people, and I think it's been a really great thing
But
for us.
I think the main thing is they don't have the staff, just like everybody else. So they thought they would be much further along than they are, but they don't have, we're expecting teams of people to come up for these installs, and we're getting 2 and 3 people.
Mr. Hedrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to the Verizon tower. Carol, perhaps I should ask you this. How certain are we that we're going to get to use that tower?
100%, we've already been told. It's just a
Okay.
matter, and they've already done all the preliminaries. It's just a matter of getting it done. And we'll have to have the contract brought forward, but we're not to there yet.
I've got a question in reference to internet reduced fees for free and reduced lunches. With the policy that's out with the schools right now, where all but 2 of the schools have free and reduced lunches, does that mean everybody would qualify for the reduced rate, except for basically those 2 schools? Or is it the traditional free and reduced lunch criteria?
I'm not familiar with the program.
Yeah, I think they would be qualifying. Cox is continuing to market it. The big push that's going through the state right now, from the infrastructure money, is not necessarily on the additional broadband, but it's on people being able to afford it. And so that's where hundreds of millions of the next few years is going to go. The $9.99 a month, I don't know that, we've pushed it for Cox. We've done a lot of the marketing, and again, open broadband's on the same. I'm not sure how many are taking advantage of it.
Because they clamored for the school bus during COVID. And
then that didn't really work out too
Right.
well, and neither did the MiFis. And Eric knows this too, that out of the people who are saying no to open broadband, it's because they have a MiFi. In general, Verizon has relieved some of the need, but people who use MiFis, know that they can be restricted, the same way your cell phone can be. And then others don't even have that level of service.
So,
And
but
that
it
was
has
a
all
problem with the buses.
unused MiFis now.
They basically expire, the same thing as our ones that we got through the ARPA grant to the library. The device itself could be re-upped, but if you don't pay the $40 a month fee, it's just a plastic device. It doesn't, it's pretty much just trash.
So we're no longer
paperwork.
paying the $40 a month?
No,
No, we're not.
no. The schools aren't, they have a limited number that they have to maintain for different reasons, I'm assuming for students who have to study from home or whatever. But they have a limited number, and the library was trying to keep a limited number. I don't even know if
We turned them all in.
turned them all off, yeah.
But if you could look into that for in reference to the lunches, it might get more people on it. Because I think it's all but 2 schools.
Well, the other thing, I don't think, people want to have, with the MiFis, they wanted to have complete free range, and they were limited on the sites you could go to. So they were from the school system, you weren't going to sit there and watch Netflix. And so a lot of people thought they wanted them, and they realized it couldn't. With the $9.99 a month provides the 25.3 basically speed, and that's it. But at least it's not restricted. But it's not like cable television or other things that people think. So it's probably some education, but we'll look into it and see what we can do. We'll talk to Quentin again about maybe we can find somebody who's on it who'd be willing to do a success story, because I think that might come off a lot better than just a company saying we have this available.
Any more questions for Mr. Beach? Thank you for your
All
time.
right, thank you.
Next item is transportation overview and state federal HRTPO funded projects. Ms. Rizzio.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Presentation coming up. So this first, I'm on the next 3 agenda items. This first one is just an update on all the projects, review of funding, which many of you have seen several times. So basically 3 pots of funding. State, federal funds are competitive, lots of money. The county has about $70 million worth of projects ongoing. Local funds that come directly through the state to Gloucester, a little under $1 million over 6 years, so not a lot of funds. It's not competitive. And then maintenance, which VDOT manages. About a couple years ago, right before the pandemic, we started a transportation planning advisory committee so that staff was not working in a silo, identifying projects and moving things forward. We have a great committee, great makeup. Our newest addition to that is somebody from the sheriff's office. It really helps us with safety issues and such. So they're an advisory to the county administrator. They came to you, we were working on the comprehensive plan transportation chapter update, going out to public engagement. They've helped us with a couple multimodal studies, a private road policy that's going to be presented at the next agenda item, the Sharrow's discussion, the pipeline studies, grants, and such. So they really help staff out making decisions and recommendations for you. So again, about $70 million in our current plan. Part of it's through the Smart Scale project application process. A big part of it is through our relationship with the HRTPO. And then there's other funds that funded this project, the courthouse improvements that require a local match. But the first 2 on the left, no local match. So this is just a list. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. These are all the primary and secondary roadway improvements in the county currently ongoing, and the 2 pending at the bottom that were recently funded through Smart Scale, or maybe in June adopted, depending. They're recommended for funding. And then we also have a lot of bike ped improvements. They are primarily in our village areas, and the reason for that is because there's a lot of bike and ped accidents in those areas, and they qualify. There's funding set aside more specifically for bike ped improvements. So just briefly going over the update on the projects. As you can see, this one's done, finally. Took a while, many, many years. Hope everybody likes it. The Guinea Road Safety Improvements HSIP project is actually out to bid. The bids are due on the 26th, so that will be going to construction very soon. The primary impetus was this dedicated left turn lane at Guinea on Route 17. VDOT also was looking at doing some access improvements. They have since removed all those from the project. So right now what went out to bid is just this intersection. This one that has been talked about a lot is another HSIP project, safety improvement. And it's to remove this merging conflict that happens right here. And a lot of accidents happen at this Sutton Road intersection. So it's basically creating a barrier here and then adding a U-turn. So you no longer be able to come out of Sutton and make a left. You have to go down and do a U-turn, and it avoids that merging. This is going to public meeting in June. Funding is not till 2026, but they are having a public meeting on this. Everybody can provide input. I know there was a lot of discussion about why don't we just make this left turn here, this right turn here instead of going on the ramp. And the reason that that is not proposed is because this intersection will fail. Congestion, there's so many people that make this turn and not many people making turns at this intersection that if you put all those people at the intersection, it'll fail and there'll be congestion. So.
Hold on, I got a question about that. So when I was growing up, and we put all these roundabouts in these days, when I was growing up, there was 2 huge roundabouts, Mercury Boulevard and Armistead, way down, and even by the James River Bridge. And when I got to be about 9, 10 years old, they pulled all those out. Yes, they did. And now they all have intersections. And you're saying that the right turns would cause an issue, yet just right down here, we don't have room to do anything else, and we have 2 dedicated right turn lanes, and the congestion has greatly improved. So you're telling me that the engineers at VDOT have decided that doing a similar issue here, in their infinite wisdom, they want people to make more U-turns. you could fix this with 2 dedicated right turn lanes, just like what we're doing down here at 314, and I don't see how it's going to fail the congestion. I mean, the U-turns are great, but you're putting in more area for people to have to make more decisions with more blind curves and everything else. I mean, I made a U-turn there today, and yeah, it's treacherous. But I do know that if there was 2 dedicated right turn lanes at 17 North and Main Street Business, that at some point, traffic will stop. This right here, traffic's still not gonna stop. I mean, it just boggles my mind. They do something, take it away, then they wanna come back and do something else. I mean, it's just befuddles me that every answer right now for VDOT is a U-turn up the road from where your congestion point is now.
Mr. Chair, can I get a clarification too? I know I was very concerned about the original draft that included the people who were making that turn, whatever we're calling it, the yielding kind of turn, that they have the right-of-way right now. But the original drawing that came to us showed that the people coming across from Walmart would be given the right-of-way and they would have to yield. Has that been changed back?
So it's 2, if you're coming from Walmart, you have to, if you're in the right lane, you have to merge before you meet up with this ramp lane. But if you're in the left lane, you have passage, and there's like a separation. So they both have the right-of-way. There's not any, if you stay in your lane and they stay in their lane, I don't believe that there is a.
That's correct. If they're still going to allow 2 lanes to come across from Walmart, currently the right lane has to merge to the left. So you're saying it will still go straight at the same time as the other lanes coming in?
No, the right lane has to merge with the left lane if
Okay,
you're
so
coming out of
same as it
Walmart.
is now?
Same as it is now. It's
Okay,
just
good.
there's a separation here. Now it's just paint stripe. There's going to be a curb there so that you can't
Okay.
cross over.
And to help Carol on that, even though we're discussing up at the other intersection, this is really for the road at Sutton's Road that you can't go directly across. No matter what they do with this traffic, it's so busy right there, you can't make a left turn. So whether they went to the light and made 2 rights, or we did the flow, this is all really to get the traffic out of Sutton Road, has to go right. They can't let them go left because of the safety issues there. And then, like you said, where they go down and make a U-turn or whatever, they just can't let them make lefts out of there.
I would still, whether they're made to go right out of Sutton's or not, I still think a little bit more clarification of why there wouldn't be 2 right turn lanes off of Route 17. Because if you put 1 in, it's not you, but if 1 went in, there's definitely, you wouldn't be able to handle the traffic, and it'd be back way up on 17. But if there were 2 right lanes, meaning using more of the median. So, I'm sure that they've looked at that, but I think when we have these meetings in June, it's going to be similar to what it was at Petsworth. There's going to be a lot of people with opinions.
Yeah, well, maybe we can get more clarification. I would definitely ask for. I know that when they did the pipeline study, they looked at this intersection as well. It's been looked at multiple times.
They can't move.
Well, so one reason that 2 right turn lanes is not preferred over the free flow right is that would actually add an entire signal phase to that intersection. So you have a limited amount of time at an intersection, and you have to dole that amount of time to each movement or each phase at the intersection. So if you add a phase, you're removing time from another movement at the intersection, whereas right now you have a free flow movement, which is always preferable because there is no phase at the intersection. It's completely missing the intersection. So Mr. Chriscoe, you brought up 3 and 14 up here. If you could have a free flow movement, right turning movement there, that would be preferable over having them at the intersection, but obviously due to constraints at the intersection, that's not possible.
Isn't this on the list to get pedestrian crossings as well?
Up here.
Correct, but that's going to also add to this. So I understand what you're saying. However, you can do what you're doing at 3 and 14 at this location as well, and you'll get the same results because that traffic is not going to bottle up enough if you can have 2 lanes going on a right turn 75% of the time while that signal's in operation?
So, well, first of all, I think there's another project at this intersection, if I'm not mistaken, where they're going to try to, so right now, when you're making a left turn out of Main Street, both sides, that is not a concurrent left turn. So you have two phases for those left turns. One of the potential projects that was identified through the study was to have those concurrent left turns so you reduce a full phase. So it's all about reducing those number of phases to try to get more traffic through the intersection. And if you add phases, that's obviously going to bog down the operations of the intersection. But your point is well made with the pedestrian signal.
And just up the road from that, there is the Smart Scale project that was funded last round for the right turn lane at TC Walker and 17B. And that's going to be the same public hearing as the project we just talked about. They're combining them, and they're hoping to get them to construction at the same time to save costs. Then we have Route 17 widening. The Route 17 widening from where it ended at the point all the way up to the courthouse area is a regional surface transportation plan priority. It's a priority project. We have funding for phase 1. The VDOT has been updating the estimates, and with inflation and everything and project aspects, the dollars have gone up. So we're re-looking at that. We have currently almost $44 million to do that. They're redoing the plans to remove some stuff and see if we can get it in the budget. The courthouse area, we do have a planning study funding available for something that we select in that, but that funding's not available till fiscal year 27. A couple bike ped, the Main Street one we just talked about that will cross at the Fox Mill, the shared use path along Main Street. And then we just started a study, we got funding through the HRTPO for a feasibility study for a bike ped facility along Warehouse Road. As you know, it's a very narrow road, lots of people use it, so we're just feasibility to see what's out there. So we will be sending notification to everybody that lives on that little peninsula between the two creeks to let them know about the study and get their input. A couple more bike ped improvements. Great Road, we had to limit the phase on that, but it's a sidewalk from Point Beach, making the linkages wherever they're missing all the way up to Lafayette Heights. And then along Roaring Springs Road, which was a really important project to the community and our multimodal study, we have funding for phase 1 to go from Main Street down to Wyncote, and we possibly will apply for another grant to take it a little further to the Holly Springs neighborhood. This is a project that Lee was just referring to at Main Street and 17. We're going to remove back some medians to allow dual left turn lanes. So that's a pending smart scale project. And then the other pending smart scale project is, of course, the Woods Crossroad. We do have the comments from that. I will send them to you tomorrow so you can peruse those. We did talk to VDOT about the removal of any access improvements in front of the Dutton store, and that is agreeable. So that will likely happen. That can be removed from the project. I know a lot of people had concerns about that, as well as other concerns. The funds allocated Gloucester, we'll talk about in 2 agenda items. And then just real quickly on maintenance. So maintenance funds are managed by VDOT. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the Guinea Road area, and Lee just gave me a list of the things that he is doing under maintenance, ditching and pipe cleaning for Marius Road, Mundy Creek Road, Jenkins Neck Road, Bonneville Road, Big Island Road, and then Jenkins and Little Neck were evaluated for trench widening. I think they're doing spots where it's needed for safety improvements. And just a shout out for their 1-800-4 road. Any citizen can call that. It goes into VDOT system for work orders for maintenance needs. So that is the end of the update. Are there any questions?
Mr. Gibson.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. That's quite the PowerPoint. That's hard to put together, a PowerPoint. Those impressive graphics. And, so I appreciate that. Just a question on Route 17, you mentioned widening. Is it widening to 3 lanes?
3 lanes both way and a shared use path on the right-hand side.
And when is the estimated
completion?
27 is when it's supposed to go to construction, but we can't move forward until we have a fully funded project. So
Okay.
that's why we're,
Thank you.
And Ms. Steele?
Carol mentioned, but want to just reiterate that she will be coming forward soon with, we hope, with another TAP application for you all to consider. We met this week, and what we were trying to do is see how the sort of synergy of what meets the criteria for those. Those are pedestrian and biking type grants. That's how this, again, the court circle, all of Main Street was done under a TAP grant. And we looked at extending the sidewalk on Great Road because, again, we were only able to do so far, so this would take it further down. And then potentially extending from Body Tot to Holly Springs that she mentioned. So all that's in the very preliminary, but I'm giving you the heads up that it's coming back, and even more so that it is a matching grant. So this is a 20% matching, and our $50,000 that's in the current budget, which 10,000 of it's already sort of been, hey, can we have this for our grant, would not be nearly enough. So it's going to be one of those fund balance, where do we get the grant match?
Ms. Rizzio, if you could, you showed the picture of the courthouse improvements. If you could let whoever know what a good job they did on managing that project, it'd be a good idea.
all right. That's all I have. I'm just standing up here because
You got a couple more?
I got a couple more.
Okay, let's go to policy recommendation, funding for private roads. Ms. Rizzio.
Okay, so this is a recommendation that we worked with our Transportation Planning Advisory Committee on. Private roads in the county, as I'm sure many of you know, there's many of them. 42% of our center lane miles are private. Many of these have maintenance needs. Citizens call us to try to get them taken over into the state system. Some people don't want them taken over. They like their private road. It works for them, but many do call us. Many of them that call us were developed prior to our subdivision ordinance. They're not to the right width. They're not built to state standards, and bringing them up to state standards is very expensive. The state has a rural additions program that used to be funded a lot more. Probably not enough back then, but it's even less now. You can only spend 5% of your secondary 6-year dollars, which is about $6,000 a year, which is not enough to bring a road into the state system. So the last 2 roads in the county that were brought into the state system was Meredith Drive in 2011 and then Lorelei Lane in 2013. Meredith Drive was on the plan since 1989, so it kind of tells you how long it takes to get something brought into the state system. So the current status, the board has decided over many years, because of the lack of funding, to not put that 5% into the rural additions program. That's just not feasible. So we have maintained, I think Planning and Zoning inherited from administration a list of rural additions. You used to put a petition together and you'd get on this list for when funding came. So we've had this list. It currently has 7 people left on it. The oldest one, I don't know the date of there, 1970 something? 74. So a lot of people, and then with that list, not people being added, we started our own like rural additions hopeful list, and there's 29 people on that list. And so we tell people about the list, kind of the current policy. We're recommending that the policy be changed because it's just not feasible to update, to give anybody hope that there's going to be some funding to update their private road. So we asked the HRTPO through their urban work plan to do a study on what are the ways to bring it in, what are the standards, what do other localities do, and what we heard is that many other localities face what we face. They use bonds, revenue sharing, and special assessments. However, many say no public funds are going to be spent to upgrade private roads. We'll give you some technical assistance, but we just don't have the funding to do that, and there's not funding at the state to do that. So we took that report, we talked to our TPAC, and they are recommending the policy that Ted has reviewed. It's in your packets, that you adopt to formally suspend the rural additions program and to provide realistic guidance to citizens on the process and procedures and requirements to upgrade their private roads. Should funding become available, we can relook at the policy and change it. So the policy basically informs them that there's no local funding available, and we provide them information as to what's needed. The road has to be in public use for 20-plus years. Adequate right-of-way has to be dedicated to the public, and it has to be wide enough, usually 40 feet, unencumbered by utilities, and it has to serve at least 3 homes per mile. And they need the funding available to upgrade the road to meet state standards. So if it's not paved, it needs to meet state standards with the sub-base material and the paving on top, or the rural additions. There's various standards depending on what it is, but it has to be upgraded typically in most cases. And then the last thing in responding to citizens is to help them understand the difficulties of bringing a road. The private property dedication, sometimes you'll have several neighbors that want to do it and are up to donate their right-of-way, and then somebody else says, no, I like it, it's private, I don't want it to be public. The funding requirements and the rarity of upgrading private roads. So next step is to discuss the policy, consider adoption, and if adopted, we will put together materials, put them on our website so that it's clear guidance for citizens and not this no man's land of, well, there may be money, but there's not now.
Any questions for Ms. Riccio on this? Resolution on page 79.
Make the motion.
All right, Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Dr. Orth? Yes. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, next item, if we could get Ms. Rizzio to come forward, it's a preparation for secondary 6-year plan.
Okay, so this is preparing you for the public hearing, joint public hearing with VDOT on May 2nd. And it discusses those little bit of funds that we get to allocate toward road improvements. There's money for paved roads and then a separate pot for unpaved roads. And just a little difference, because we have been talking a lot about VDOT a lot about improving some things where there's drainage issues, there's roads that need to be paved, there's potholes, so the difference basically, as many of you probably know, that the secondary 6-year plan, the money we get is for improvements. It's for things that are not currently there that we want to add. It's not for repaving or potholes or drainage, I guess, clearing out drainage ditches. Those facilities are there that need to be maintained, so that would come through VDOT's maintenance funds. So typically, since I've been doing transportation, we've done left turn lanes, right turn lanes. That's the typical project we can afford. We get 105 a year for paved roads and about 40 currently a year for unpaved roads. The less roads you have in the unpaved, your funding goes down. We currently have very little in the unpaved. Our most recent completed paved road project was a right turn lane at Meredith. These are the projects we currently have in the plan. I'll go over them. The right turn lane at Fiddlers with the sidewalk connections is happening this summer. Where did we go? Okay, yes. It's happening this summer. The little sign that says no right turn on red is going to go away, and the light is going to be actuated to where if somebody pushes the button, it's going to signal that you can't turn right on red. But as long as there's not a pedestrian crossing, you will be able to make a right turn on red. And then we're making the sidewalk connections to our other funded sidewalk projects so that now you'll be able to go all through this intersection on sidewalk continuously. Providence Road. So Providence Road right turn lane has been on the plan for a while. We've tried 2 or 3 rounds of smart scale so that we can do it better. We can actually acquire right away and do the roadway the way it should be done. But we have been unsuccessful with smart scale. We were the closest this time. I think we were 2 under. They funded 2 above us, so we came close, but no cigar. There's a lot of development going on around that corner. There's a proposed rural farms and a Carolot pet store, and they're all kind of in the site planning process. And then we have the county-owned property at the intersection as well. So we're trying to get everybody together so that whatever improvements get made at that intersection, coordinate and do the best for all. So we are just going to save the money that we have for Providence right now there, because if the developer does it, he's going to do a better job. He can actually move the road, he's donating some right of way and building his turn lanes to where if we put a right turn lane in, it's gonna be on the south side and it's gonna get the road closer to that building, which is not ideal. So if that all goes away and doesn't happen, we have the money there to do it, but hopefully everybody will work together and can make that intersection really work well. We did talk to VDOT about, okay, what else, what other projects can we think about for a paved road? Can we supplement something you're doing maintenance-wise and make a better project? Are there any drainage improvement projects that maybe we want to look at? For trench widening in the area, it's just too expensive for the secondary 6-year. Many areas, there's not enough shoulder, there's a lot of narrow roads. There's just not enough money to go around for that. And a lot of the roads are not feasible for that along long stretches, little places, but then you're just widening little pieces of the road and it doesn't make sense for a whole road. Drainage improvements we looked at, there was a recommendation, Perrin Creek, when the previous county engineer was here, he was trying to look at that area floods a lot, so VDOT is gonna do a study for Perrin Creek to see what can be done to alleviate some of that flooding. That may be a future secondary 6-year plan, depending on what that study shows. And we're also finding out if maybe we can use our secondary 6-year plan funds as a match for other funding for the FEMA flood funds that are coming around. So all that to say, basically, we're not proposing any new projects, just the ones that we currently have, Fiddler's, right turn and sidewalk connections, and then keeping the Providence Road on hold pending what happens with the development along the corridor.
Ms. Rizzo, can we add new projects?
Yes,
We can.
yes.
Do we do that tonight or wait till May 2nd?
Yep, that's what, at the end, my last slide is, any other ideas we can talk through with VDOT. Unpaved funds, so unpaved road has to have at least 50 or more average annual daily traffic. VDOT does traffic counts to see what roads qualify. The recently completed one was Belleville Road. Bonneville Road qualified. That is gonna propose to be added to the plan, so that's one unpaved road proposed to be added. It should be done, I think, this fiscal year if you guys agree with adding it. And it's up in the, I guess in your Jenkins Neck, Kinney area. So summary, so paved roads, yeah, just maintain the projects we have, continue to look for new projects, unpaved, add that one, and then are there any other improvement projects you'd like considered for the public hearing next?
Mr. Bazzani.
So gentlemen, we all know about the issue we had at Little England Road where, and I'm thankful for VDOT that came out to pave with asphalt 2 small sections of the road. However, the remaining portions of the road are only 5 or 6 feet wide, and I'm asking the board to see if we can put at least Little England Road on the 6-year track to get the rest of that road paved, because there are 330 residents that live on that one road, and it's heavily used. It's a cluster of homes and there's secondary roads off of that use that road on a continuing basis. You can drive there at 11 o'clock at night. I will guarantee there's 5 or 6 cars coming out of that road at the same time. So it's narrow. It's dangerous for school buses. It is dangerous for pedestrians. It needs to be widened at least 1 or 2 feet on each side so that 2 cars can pass each other. Tonight I was going by the paved portion that VDOT recently did 4 weeks ago, and the car had to pull over so that I can go by. So the road needs to be widened on 1 or 2. So I'm asking, gentlemen, if we can put this project, you've seen it, some of you have come by to see it, and Woods Gate Lane too as well. If you've seen that road that comes off of Little England Road, it's only 3 or 4 feet wide. It's been continuously destroyed by cars and vehicles and heavy trucks. Those good folks need that road to be widened if at all possible. And then my last request perhaps is Jenkins Neck Road, which is a horrible road to drive on. You should try to drive that road, and hopefully with your good consent, we can add these 2 projects on this 6-year plan whenever it can get done with funding.
I'll just jump, I know VDOT did look at Little England and Jenkins Neck for trench widening. And I think they gave me an average cost per mile to do that. It's around $400,000, but that's provided you need to have a shoulder area to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're moving ditches and you're acquiring right away and you're getting utilities out of it, which is much more than a secondary 6-year plan funding can.
I think the residents would much prefer that the road get paved as opposed to trenching the ditches. The ditches work to some extent, but it's that road that, you know, it's, if you ever watch a school bus come through there, it's dangerous. And Mr. Smith saw it himself. We were there about 2 months ago, and it is a safety hazard, and some kid's gonna get hurt in those, because if that bus veers off and falls into a 3-foot ditch because there's not adequate enough width on the road, somebody's gonna get hurt.
So
I'm just asking you good folks to consider it.
Mr. Gibson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a cost estimate for widening Little England Road? What would that cost per mile? Does VDOT have a
it was
estimate?
it was about 400,000 to do just one side trench widening, whereas if you have an adequate shoulder, I think it was 2 foot?
Yeah,
You wanna?
1 to 2 feet.
1 to 2 foot shoulder. If you have an average area, if the ditch is not right against the road, then they just come through and they trench and add some pavement there. And that was about 400,000 a mile, I think.
How many miles are we looking at?
The first half mile is perfectly fine. It's when you come around the curve, it's about 1.1 miles from that point to the end of the farm, where Little England Farm is. And the road in front of several homes along the way, you know, we've measured them, if they're only like 5 feet wide.
5 feet other than a car?
Just 5 feet wide. That's it.
Well, wouldn't...
5 feet wide.
The road is 5 feet?
5 to 6 feet wide, yes it is. I would say the last 300 or 400 feet.
It's 1 car wide.
Yeah. Well, with reference to this, wouldn't it be maintenance anyway, if you were just repaving it? And this isn't to you as much as Mr. McKnight, Ms. Rizzio.
So are we talking widening the road or repaving the road, I guess?
Well, if you came, we
Yeah.
all came, for those of you that did, there's about 2 feet of eroded road on each side of Little England that was just continuously over the years, just eroded away. You can ask, you did that with the little portion that you made in front of Little England Road down the street from the farm. So you could come down another 1.5, 2 feet on each side and widen that road with
Now-
asphalt like you did.
And that
just
was,
recently.
that was patching, you know, I just want, there's a
Well,
distinction.
more than patching, you actually paved it like a like a black asphalt.
Right, it was patching with asphalt for the
Right.
safety, because that was a location identified when we were out there, that school buses turned around. We had a maintenance issue at that intersection in general, so it was a patch pave. But again, are we talking widening the road or resurfacing the road? Because resurfacing the road we can do under maintenance. It was resurfaced, I believe, last in 2017. And that is maintenance, but of course, in its current footprint.
That's the sand and tar.
Surface treatment, yes, sir. But there's other options. There's Cape Seal, which is surface treatment with a latex cover, and I can give you locations where we've used that, just so you can see what it looks like. But again, there's a difference between widening the road, which would trigger a whole litany of things, as we discussed out on Little England in our site visit, versus just resurfacing the road using maintenance dollars. So I just want to make that widening will, again, as
So what do you call the black asphalt that you put down? What category does that fall into?
That's patching. So we're limited to patching of about 500 feet using asphalt with our contract. We have a patching contract, and it's very specific in the contract language. This is for procurement issues and that sort of thing, that we're limited to about 500 feet. We can stretch that if it makes logical, good sense, business sense to stretch that. But there's limits to that, obviously. We can't go and pave an entire road. Then it becomes a paving project as opposed to a patching project. So there is a difference between those two operations.
All we really need is another
Yes,
500
Mr. Orth.
So the question is, are you looking at widening or paving?
The residents prefer paving the road with black asphalt. Because what we have now, if you have a concrete driveway, you are running tar into your driveway. And these folks are paying lots of dollars to get their driveways power washed because the tar oozes up. It oozes up and it's a sticky goo. And you're driving that onto your
So if
driveway.
we do that, if we do that, then that is only 500 foot would be maintenance.
Correct. I mean, so under maintenance and the resurfacing schedule, we can put back what is currently there, or use something like Cape Seal or a product like that. We can do with our maintenance, with the maintenance funds that we have in Saluda, we can do patch spot locations. But again, we're limited to the amount that we can do with under that
I think the residents would prefer the so-called patching because, they really like what happened 3 weeks ago. They said, well, why can't we do the rest of the road that way? So is patching part of the 6-year plan project?
No,
We would not put that on a 6-year plan project.
No, sir.
Okay. So how do we get the
Now
rest of that?
again, if you patch, you're just patching within the current footprint of the road. So if the road is, as you were saying, 5 feet.
But the footprint extends 2 feet on each side.
Well, again, what's currently there, I mean, there's a little bit of wiggle room, but it's not going to widen the road, as I think is what your ultimate goal is for that road.
Well, that's probably because I don't understand how VDOT system works or what color of money we're talking about here. Well, it seems like there's lots of colors of money used for different projects for VDOT. The residents want the road paved just like they saw the black asphalt that they saw there. They're very happy with that. They would like to see the rest of the road paved all the way to the farm because there are children that are coming up down there and the school bus is going to have to come down and pick them up. It's going to be important that we get that road widened enough so our bus can easily turn around. Right now, if a bus came down to the area where the farm is and there are 3 or 4 children now coming up back there in several homes, it's going in the ditch.
They turn around before that point.
Way
though,
before, but I'm
correct?
telling you,
Yeah.
there are additional children down the road further to the farm, which will need that road to be widened.
So for Ms. Rizzio's guidance, are there any projects we want to add to the secondary 6-year plan?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to see Little England, Little England added. But certainly not the tar and gravel.
It's a densely populated stretch of road, believe it or not. It is densely populated. And it's not like it's a rural road where, it's just about 50 houses on a 1-mile stretch. There are 336 homes back there using that road, and it's getting destroyed every day. A truck will come by, an 18-wheeler truck or a large truck goes by, it just eats up 6 inches of that road every time because you have to pull over to let the other car go by, and when that happens, they're cracking the road open, and it just becomes, and Carol, you saw it yourself. It is just, it's a disaster, is what it is.
And Mr. Chair, I have a hard time understanding how what is it, the Broadmarsh? Is it Broadmarsh Road, the one you turn in by the store? Buck Rose? They did that road nicely.
Yeah, they did, yeah. Cuba Road and Mark Pine Road were just beautifully
Few
paved.
houses, it's beautiful riding through there,
So,
but they stopped right there.
it stopped at Little England. And that road is not as dense. That's probably about 50 homes down Mark Pine and Cuba Road. There's probably about 50 homes back there, maybe 100 homes, but not like Little England where there's 330 homes back there. So, I would appreciate the support, gentlemen. Put this on a 6-year plan.
Resurfaced with asphalt versus the tar.
So can you work on that project?
Yeah, I'll talk with VDOT, we'll see what we can do.
Okay. And
Thank you.
Mr. Chriscoe, do you have a question?
Ms. Rizzio, on the Fiddler's Green Road sidewalks construction, the ones that were put in there now, were they funded through a grant cycle?
They were funded through what Smart Scale is now. It used to be HB2. They were
Right.
funded.
So do you remember what we got for that when we put those in? How much that project was, that HB2? The reason I ask is because they're getting ready to tear up part of something that we've already funded with grant money to put in a right turn lane instead of waiting until such time it was all going in at once. So I would think that, you know, I know that we had the Providence Road that we don't have everything in place for, you know, was wondering if VDOT would consider giving us some credit back, being that we've already used taxpayer money that was set aside to fund a grant that now we're going to tear up to fix, to put in a right turn lane. I was wondering if they would be willing to work with us more at Providence Road, because, you know, they have no problems coming into the county, changing how the road is designed, like they did at Gloucester Point when I was about 11. All the concrete was in there, and then they pulled it all out, and now it's all back in again. It's just amazing that they continue to do these projects, and, I mean, when that was going in, we knew the right turn lanes were coming, but we still went ahead and put in sidewalks that now we're going to tear back up to put in a right turn lane and then put a new sidewalk back in.
Ms. Steele.
Right prior to the meeting, I asked for a favor from VDOT if they could do it regarding the Providence Road intersection, and got a positive answer on that, which will save the county some money in doing a study to determine if the existing street light pole that is on the Abbott Realty side can support a second arm going across Providence Road. And they have to do a structural engineering study and all that, and normally that would be something that would have to be covered, you know, for. And what we met this week, and I intend to get an email, which I'll spell out more in the email to you all, but you know, we have the property that the county garage is on and the pet care going in, and we met with them, and it would make so much sense to align that intersection and make that a much better and safer way for people to pull out. But that's going to require funds that unfortunately we can't use our secondary money on. We're still going to have to get some support from some of the businesses, but that is one payback. I just wanted to mention that VDOT agreed that they would do that for us, knowing that we really want to move forward with that intersection and making improvements as soon as we can.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rizzio.
Thank you.
Next item we'll go to is budget discussion. Ms. Steele handed out a sheet for some things to think about.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, the sheet starts at the point where we ended with two important changes on the revenue change. So if we need to, we have the chart and we can bring it back up like we did. But after we met last time, there was a lot of interest in pursuing the investigator's position, and we were looking at how we would fund that. Well, in the meanwhile, we discovered that the comp board payment to the county was more than we thought it was. And so if you look at, we are going to be receiving $243,654 more dollars with the current mini budget at the 5% rate. And so if we subtract the $90,000 from that, that still leaves the county with $153,654 to the good. So depending upon how the board wants to proceed, there's a couple of different things that you can do, and I want to mention too that after we put this sheet together and we got all the figures we thought finalized, after 4:30 we realized that there was a difference in the social services part. So this will need to be updated again, but it's close. So with what I had spoken with Delegate Hodges and asked about the 2%. Others were talking about it, and I didn't want us to be caught sort of blindsided, and I talked to the superintendent to make sure that they weren't going to be coming back here with a request for additional money that, you know, and they said they're in good shape, but we have some things that we have to do, and we can do them. So the first thing is, if the state, so we don't know that this is going to happen for sure, but it sounds like it will, if the state approves a budget, maybe in June, with that additional 2% for the comp board and the state employees, we will receive an additional $198,159 in funds to help do that, leaving us at the $351,813 mark. The must-do with that is, by law, you have to give them the full 7% according to their own salary now, even if they are, if we have a supplement, we don't get to count that as going towards the 7%. You know, it's got to be a straight out, whatever they say, 5%, 6%, 7%. So we're in really good shape because of the fact that our current budget includes the largest department that would have, this would be impacting already in the budget, which is our sheriff's department. So the only additional expense we have that would be a must-do is $42,000, leaving a balance of $309,718. That also leaves some inequity, so I wanted you all to be, you know, have this information and then have in your discussions. So the first thing is, when we have people in the Commissioner of Revenue, the Treasurer's Office, the Commonwealth Attorney, and the Clerk of the Courts, as well as the Sheriff's Department, that are working side by side with people who would be getting a 7% raise, it's an awkward thing of they could be at the exact same position, and we've always taken that position with the Sheriff's Department that, you know, they don't apply for a comp board job, they apply for a deputy. If somebody comes to apply to be a deputy clerk, you know, they don't apply, or a, you know, treasurer's office, they don't apply for it to be a comp board necessarily. They're working in that office and they're not thinking about the impact of these things. And so there are about 17 other employees that would be impacted, that would be right next to people that you mandated to give them raises. So the addition to bring everybody up in those departments, and this does include the Sheriff's Department, the positions that currently are not 7%, the administrative, like the cook or the nurse or other positions, to give everybody that 7% would take up another $16,271, leaving you still a surplus of $293,447.
So that's not the actual Commonwealth Attorney or the actual treasurer or the actual...
This is how much more that 2%.
This is their...
That department.
That department.
Okay, got it.
So that all of their people that work in that department would get a 7%, not just the ones that are comp board stated. And so when you look at the can-do, the second can-do of if you wanted to have all the people in the county having the same raise as the teachers, as the others, the comp boards and the state board, the state employees, that's where the 326. Now, the 326 includes the social services. So that's where the correction needs to be made. That money needs to go up under the must-do, which will reduce your balance, but altogether, the bottom line is if you do the leftover, because you'd have enough money for the must-do. You can see that, you got 309, you can add social services up there, no problem. But the 33, let me say that is actually going to potentially grow, because when the state funds the social services, they're additional, they don't fund it 100%. And so we're working with them to try to get an estimate, but we won't know until a little bit later. They haven't, because again, with General Assembly not meeting, they have a memo of what they were supposed to do, and that's what they've done. So approximately 33,000, maybe say 45,000 short if you wanted to give all county employees that raise. A couple other considerations. The 1% threshold, so that if funding comes in, which these small amounts aren't going to get us anywhere near the 2.17 million. But with the schools, and if the schools get any additional capital funding, I wanted you to know where we would, once we get more than 2.170, then we've got to do the advertising, to amend the budget with that public hearing. And I tried, and I even asked Delegate Hodges to get an update. There was a bill that was put in, a budget amendment, that called for additional, God bless you, additional construction money for schools. And if you recall, every school district got construction money this year, and they asked for it to be appropriated. It appears that there may be some money coming. I don't think it's going to be as much as we got last year, but nobody knows. So that's just kind of out there in la-la land to be thinking about and to ponder. I also wanted to remind you of if there were leftover funds, depending upon which kind of a level you do, if the 7% versus if the 7% doesn't happen, that the HR position was $105,000. And then I also wanted to be very upfront and clear about the nonprofits, that we did level funding. And so you can see that some of them did not get what they asked for. Some asked for inflationary adjustments, and one asked to expand their program. Two, I should say. I know, I'm so sorry. It's like the allergy attack. Budget does that to me too. So I'm very happy to answer any questions, and I'm sorry that I don't know more information definitively, but I think in talking with the chair, it seemed like we needed to bring all this up and decide whether you all want to adopt a budget and then see what happens, later on and carry over your meeting notes. So
Mr. Bazzani.
So just one quick question on the all remaining employees receiving 7% increase. Does that include those employees that make over $100,000 a year?
Yes, it does. And I want to say, one thing I forgot to say in that. In the, right now, this figure takes out the step. One of the things to make it sort of more palatable, because 7% is a higher COLA. I mean, we all know I paid more than $7 for a hamburger at Wendy's tonight, so life has changed. But anyway, what our suggestion was to take out that step. And so if you decide not to, if you go with the 7% and for the other employees and don't address other county employees, we definitely want to keep their step in there. But I felt like it was more than reasonable to break policy and not offer a step if somebody's getting a 7% raise. So it's actually not 7% as far as new money, because it includes that 0.66. So that didn't answer your question,
No,
but
but I
it made
think
me
it would be
remember.
more equitable if we did not provide pay raises for those employees who make over $100,000 a year and give that money to non-supervisory staff, the remaining staff that's over, non-management staff of the county. I think they deserve a pay increase, and I truly believe that those people are making $100,000, unless they're not budgeting their money and living reasonably, can afford not to have a 7% pay raise this year. That's my feeling.
I think you're feeling, if I can.
Yeah, but are you still suggesting that we sit with the 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
If I can, Mr. Chair, I think that there's probably a lot of people who feel the same way that you do, and it's very understandable, and I don't think that's something that's just, our area. I think it's brought up, in other places, do you do something different with the higher waged employees?
We should.
And I can understand where that might happen, or the board may want to do that. The couple things I would ask that you keep in mind in any revisions or changes that you make in this process is, first of all, the people that are making those higher salaries are working extended hours, and we are a very lean staff, so a lot of that extra responsibility falls to them. Our most vulnerable situation that we have are with our most seasoned employees, and that may leave for retirement, and hopefully we can keep them a little longer. So, and we have, depending upon what threshold you use, we have lost some of the higher salary employees because they are still paying quite a bit more in other places. That doesn't mean not to do it. I just think it's a balancing thing of where do you draw the line, where you hurt morale of people who are working night and day and give up their family time and all that, where other employees may go home and actually have a life after 4:30 because they're not required to do those extra things.
Well,
So it's a balancing act.
And I understand. My counter argument, when I was working full-time, I was doing 60, 70-hour weeks myself, so I got paid the same thing. My point would be is that we already have issues where employees are going to other counties. And so if we can give them a little more to make them more competitive for the non-supervisory positions and make those positions more competitive with our neighboring counties, that would go a long way to keeping employees here in the county as opposed to paying someone who makes $100,000 a year or more getting a $7,000 pay raise, where that money could be distributed equitably to non-supervisory individuals. And I understand everybody works hard. Everybody has to work hard, and it's just the way it is. You get paid the higher salaries to work hard. It's not because you worked extra hard. You are in that position because you have to work hard. So I don't agree that we have to pay you more because you are in that position. You have to work extra harder. I'm just saying that we should pay employees to keep them here in this county, and it's a non-supervisory. I'm concerned and care about the non-supervisory employees who decide to stay in Gloucester County and work here. If we don't give them at least a competitive salary, we're going to lose them as well. Last year, you told us in the budget that a lot of people left the county because of pay. So this may resolve quite a bit of the issue we have with lower paid employees. It can give them an extra boost as well.
Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the update on this. I would say that if the money is present, I would support a consistent 7% raise across the board because we are in an extremely competitive job market among all the localities. It's a significant raise, but we are only as good as our employees, and we need to retain the good employees that we have. Just for example, Ms. Rizzio just gave such a polished presentation, excellent PowerPoint. It was so easy to understand, and that takes a lot of work to put something like that together. And in my view, an organization is only as good as its leaders. And we see that in the military, we see that in athletic teams, in private business. If you don't perform, you lose your job. And if you don't perform, your organization suffers. And so while I understand you want to support the folks who are on the front lines, kind of the workers, and they are just as valuable as the leaders, but those workers need direction. And if we lose our institutional knowledge and all of the years of experience that they have, our entire county is going to suffer. So I hear what you're saying. I want to take care of those employees that are just starting out in their careers, but I think we need those seasoned leaders to continue to lead our county. And I think we're going to lose a lot if we discourage them by not giving them the same raise.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at this, and I know there's still some work to do as far as what the balance is going to be. At the end of the day, I understand both points, but I think what we're going to have to look at, because with where we ended up in the budget, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room. There's not an extra $45,000 or $50,000 sitting there for us to make that bogey up. At the end of the day, I understand Mr. Bazzani's point about we can trim some of the top raise, but at the end of the day, I think what we need to look at doing is our remaining employees may only get like a 6.75% raise, and then we have to worry about that the next budget that we have. We take whatever we can do, whatever that number comes out to be. If it's 33 now and it goes to 50, then unfortunately there's only going to be $276,000 left to make up everybody else's pay increase. We have budgeted currently, I think, about 5.6. I think that we could probably get to 6.7 for the remaining staff, because I don't know where we're going to come up with that other $50,000.
Dr. Orth?
We have some time, correct? I mean, this is our budget discussion. So it gives us some time because we're not going to adopt the budget tonight, but we have some time. Given that these are figures that we've just gotten, I think it takes a bit of time for this to settle in. And Chair, I'm not sure what your plans are for subsequent meetings to get us to that final stage.
That's a very good segue, Dr. Orth. Okay, but let me say this. Our plan right now is, I know we're going to go into closed session after this, or after supervisor discussion. But, so anybody tuning in, we're going to continue this meeting after it's over, or after the closed meeting, to tomorrow night at 7 o'clock here at the Colonial Courthouse, Wednesday, April 19th. So, 7 o'clock. For make sure everybody can get here. Yes, I know it's a change in time, but, so, that being said, that way tomorrow night, we can have a little bit more in-depth discussion. And the plan, as of right now, is to vote on the budget May 2nd. Mr. Chriscoe.
Ms. Steele, you also mentioned in the can-do that took out the step. Can tomorrow night, can you have that number for what the step cost as well? So we can look at every option. I think that having that in front of us tomorrow will be integral, because I don't know where it's going to end up, but I think we have to look at any and all scenarios to make this work.
And correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we leave the $100,000 in the budget for the comprehensive plan?
We did, and that is a one-time, but we did.
But it's still in the budget as recurring. Well, it's in the budget as
It's in the budget right now, and we might have another plan in a different department, or however, that's why we're talking about maybe putting in a different, the other area where we have planned to stay in is the 50,000 for the grant match, and the other area that the board could look at would be the goal for vacancy savings and transfer savings.
Okay. So any more questions for tonight about the budget? Okay. Tonight, let's read over this, let's look at it, let's come to some kind of thought process of our own so we can clearly articulate it tomorrow and be able to discuss it. So, the next item on the agenda will be supervisor discussion.
I'm disgusted.
Okay. That being said, before you read us into closed session, Mr. Wilmot, let's take a few-minute break and then be ready to go. And that way, whoever wants to leave can leave.
Before we have to throw you out.
Yeah, before we throw you out. You don't have to go home, but you need to get out of here.
Whereas the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors desires to discuss particular subjects in closed meeting during the course of its meeting of April 18, 2023, and whereas the nature of the subjects are discussion or consideration of the acquisition, disposition of real property, known as the Old Page Middle School property. The discussion of same in closed meeting is expressly permitted by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3. And personnel matters pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, specifically the County Administrator-Finance Director. Now therefore be it resolved that the County Board of Supervisors, Gloucester County Board of Supervisors, does hereby convene in closed meeting for the purposes herein expressed pursuant to the legal authority herein recited.
So moved.
Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson? Yes. Dr. Orth?
County Board of Supervisors has completed its discussion in closed meeting and now desires to continue its open meeting, and whereas only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting, and the only subjects heard, discussed, or considered in said closed meeting were the matters identified in the resolution by which it was convened. Now therefore be it resolved that the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors does hereby reconvene in open meeting at its meeting of April 18, 2023, and certifies the matters set forth in Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712D.
So moved.
Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Dr. Orth? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. I'd like to get, do I need a motion for this, right?
Motion to continue.
Motion to continue tomorrow night at 7 o'clock here in the Colonial Courthouse.
Second.
All right, this meeting is now continued till tomorrow.